Hello and welcome to Setting the Stage, episode 49, Josh and Last Fleet. Josh is another one of the guests that got nominated for a Crit Award in 2024, so this should be a good episode looking into all the cool stuff he's done. And today I'm here with Josh from Black Armada Tales, or is the publishing company also called Black Armada Tales? I'm forgetting.
Black Armada Games is the publishing company, yeah.
All right, yeah, Black Armada Games too. All right. So you're a game designer, and also have a podcast that kind of like features your games.
Yeah,
That you've
amongst other
designed.
games, yeah, absolutely.
hmm And the one we're going to talk about today is Last Fleet, which isn't the most recent one, but is the story that has concluded most recently. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, apart from Escape from Tentacle City, which is a one shot that we ran in between the two. So yeah.
hmm yeah. Before we talk about like games and then the podcast and the story on the setting, I wanted to hear who you are outside of games, but that you are a game designer, so that might be sort of a different question than usual.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, well, like you say, I am a game designer. I gave up life as a government official, working for the UK government about a year and a half ago, I guess, something like that. So I've been doing game design full time since then, but I still have that, that background. Obviously, I live in England, as you might be able to tell from my voice,
Mm-hmm.
near the Peak District, which is a beautiful part of the country. That's somewhere I like to spend a lot of time. And yeah, I got a couple of kids. We all do martial arts together, me, my kids, my partner. So that's a thing that we do in our free time. Yeah, that's me.
Oh, cool. What type of martial arts?
It is mixed martial arts, so I guess probably a big chunk of it is jujitsu. Just this morning we were doing some judo, and I guess the striking is probably a mix of, karate probably and other types of striking martial art.
Mhm.
So it's the whole 9 yards.
All right, neat. I tried doing that with my daughter when she was old enough, but she did not like it.
Yeah, I mean, you either like it or you don't, right? But so far, our two
hmm
seem to enjoy it. It was them who got us into it, and yeah, we have a lot of fun doing it together. So,
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I started doing it with my dad when I was a kid.
oh yeah, well, I could have mentioned as well. My dad is now coming. It seems like anybody who comes to the dojo for long enough to like see 5 minutes of it is like, ooh, I could do that. So yeah, now it's
Oh,
three
great.
generations of the family beating each other up. It's nice.
Imagine you're in different classes than your kids, but yeah,
No,
yeah,
no.
okay.
It's one of the things I really like about the place we go to. They do a family class where,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
you like the very young ones. They do get hived off because they're obviously a little bit small. But one of the nice things about being an adult going to this class is I get to beat up young people, which is very satisfying.
Okay.
That's a joke. I
Uh,
mean, I do get to beat them up, and it is very satisfying. But I don't mean it in uh, a nasty way.
right. Yeah. No, I know what you meant. Well, yeah. What brought you to RPGs initially?
Oh man. Well, long time ago. I guess I started when I was about 10. A new kid came to our school. He brought with him the Red Box D&D set, and he started running games for us in lunch break. So, um, yeah, I was just straight away hooked on the whole concept of a game that involved imagining stuff, but also having rules.
hmm
And yeah, it just kind of it went on from there. Uh, Started buying Dragon magazine, discovered that there were other games as well as D&D. Got into those. I did a stint doing LARPing in college. So
Oh,
I've done
cool.
lots of different RPG related stuff. It's been a constant in my life since that first time, really.
And when did you start DMing? Was that like initially when you were doing it with your friend in high school, or?
Yeah, I guess so. I I think he was our DM for a bit, and I mean I don't know. I hear that there are people who don't like to DM. I have never felt that way. Like as soon as I knew that I could DM, I wanted to do it. Yeah, very excited about the whole thing. I can't remember when I actually started. I think I did a bit of DMing in school, which I was not very good at. We were young, it's that kind of I want you to follow my railroaded plots. We don't want to follow your
Uh-huh.
railroaded plots kind of interaction. So it was, yeah, it was not good, but for some reason it didn't
Yeah, I
put me
had one of
off.
those.
Right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, my first DM I think was really good at like getting us to not see that as the archetype for DMing because he had this island that we went to, and the island had like 10 different problems with it, so we could kind of like bounce around between the 10
Mm.
problems and work on solving one and then go somewhere else when that one got too tough, or we could tough it out and figure a solution somehow.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, at that age, I did not have that kind of skill. I think I remember a, a group of my players. I wanted them to go south, and they were like, "No, we're going to go east." And I was like, okay, cool. Well, an angel appears and tells you, "No, you should not go east." Like that. That was where I was at. Obviously, I know now that that's a bad thing to do, but at the time, I was like, "Jesus, what I want them to."
Did you ever use the quantum ogre strategy?
Ah, well, I don't know if I did. I think at some point I learned um, to improvise more, which
Hmm.
functionally is the same as the quantum ogre strategy. But I don't think I ever kind of said I'm just going to say this thing that was to the south is now to the east. I don't think that occurred to me, and I still kind of feel like it's a bit of a strange. Like either you think there are real things out there, in which case you'd stick by it, or you're improvising, in which case, yeah, do whatever you like, really.
Well, yeah, and you've since moved on to sort of away from D&D into more narrative improv based games anyways.
Yeah,
So
100%.
how did that change happen for you?
Yeah, good question. So I guess I came across narrative games through Fiasco.
Hmm. It's a popular one.
Yeah, right. So somebody had described it to me, and I thought that sounds stupid. But somehow I came across it and decided to give it a try, and really just fell in love with the whole kind of you don't need to come up with a scenario. I mean, to set the context for this, I'd been up in the 6 years running up to this. I'd been running a campaign of Dark Heresy, which, if you have not played it, is a pretty traditional, heavily GM prep oriented kind of a game. It's an investigation game, so there's a lot of prep in terms of kind of coming up with clues and figuring out how to feed just the right amount of information so that people feel like they've had to think to solve the mystery without
Right.
basically telling them the answer, or yeah, that you get that balance right. But that is probably the most stressful game I've ever run. Um, so I was kind of open to the idea of what if you didn't have to do that? What if you didn't have to spend several hours of stressful kind of carefully prepping the session, and then every time someone says something unexpected, kind of biting your teeth and going, "Ah, I don't know, what can I reveal here? I've got to be careful not to just ruin the whole scenario." And Fiasco came along, and it was just like, "Wow, this is amazing."
Yeah, here's the solution.
Right. I mean, I guess in a way, it's the solution, and it's a different kind of game, really. I'm not sure if it is quite the solution to that problem, but it was a wonderful experience to be able to switch into that mode of play. I got
Yeah,
very into
maybe
that.
more Brindlewood Bay if you're familiar with that
Yeah,
one.
absolutely. I mean, I am familiar with it. In fact, we are currently running the Between on Black Armada Tales, which is
Oh,
a variant on that system. So, and in fact,
okay.
our first game on Black Armada Tales was Apocalypse Keys, which also works in a very similar way. So I'm very familiar with that. I like it. I'm writing a game at the moment which uses a similar system, but that wasn't where I was at the time. It was much more freeform. And then And then along came Apocalypse World, and I think that is really, I guess, my lodestar for game design. I don't think it's like the perfect game or anything, but there was a lot in that game that sort of showed how to bring together very improvised, very narrative stuff like Fiasco and much more structured kind of player plus GM type of games like Dark Heresy. It kind of sits at for me, the perfect intersection between the two, and I haven't really left that zone of design or play since.
Well, yeah, that's pretty cool. So you made a transition from sort of playing other people's games to making your own and then playing them and now doing that as your full-time job. So how did that progression happen for you?
Yeah, well, it happened around about the same time. I mean, in a way, I've been designing since I started role playing. I think a lot of people probably can empathize with that. I think as soon as you pick up this game, which is like, I mean, mechanically, the basic D&D set is not that complicated, I don't think. And then, of course, it plugs into your imagination. So it's almost like an invitation right there to say, why don't you make your own game? You know, straight away it was like, hey,
Yeah.
I can just reskin this as a science fiction game. That shouldn't be too hard. I'll just go through the monster manual and rename all the monsters. Done. So I was doing that straight away. But it was around about the time that I was getting into Fiasco and all of that, that my friend Martin and my partner, who I probably should have mentioned, my partner is also a game designer and role player, and that's kind of how we met each other. And we as a result, spend a lot of time gaming, more than is probably healthy for any two people. So we had him round. We had a thing that we ran at the time called Final Friday. Every last Friday of the month, we would get people round to ours, and it had to be infrequent because we lived in London. Everyone was scattered around this massive metropolis, and we would all come together
Right.
last Friday of the month. And the mission was play a game you've never played before. So that was you're supposed to turn up and try and play a game that you've not played before. And we had a lot of fun doing that. But it was in the aftermath of one of those. We sat down with our friend Martin, and he said, "Hey, we all seem to be quite good at this." Um, we at the time we were regularly playing games on holiday together. We would go away to like a set of cottages somewhere. We would all run games for each other, and probably a good 50% plus of the games there were homebrew. People would write their own systems, they'd write their own scenarios. So we all kind of felt like we do a lot of this. And he was saying, well, why aren't we sell this stuff? It's good stuff, that what we're making. Why don't we sell it? And we kind of said, yeah, that's an interesting thought. I mean, I guess we kind of probably I thought that's not really going to go very far. It'll be a bit of fun. It sounds like great idea. Let's do it. But I wasn't expecting anything much to come of it. And
Yeah,
I think
probably accurate for most people.
right. I think that is true. But also, because I was just getting into those sorts of indie games, I was becoming aware of people who had just written their own games, published them, and made some money. Maybe not a lot of money, but I mean, Vincent Baker, who wrote Apocalypse World with Meg A. Baker, his partner, I believe they do that as their main gig. I know Jason Morningstar is at least part-time on game design. So I was starting to become aware of people who were doing game design as something a bit bigger than just I will put my homebrew out into the world and see what happens.
Yeah.
So it was opportune, really, and I think quite quickly we started to get more serious about, okay, actually you can do serious stuff in this space. We were very lucky to get into it at the point where Kickstarter had become a thing. Drive-through RPG was a thing. So there were ways to get your stuff out into the world, which, if we'd had that conversation, I don't know, 10 years earlier, 5 years earlier even, we might have gone, no, this is impossible. There's just no way to do it, really, and make money out of it. But there was, and here we are. Martin's not doing it anymore, by the way, but me and Becky, we stuck with it.
Hmm. Yeah. No, I think that's really cool. And how did the podcast that you were doing get sort of into that space as well? Was that conceived as like a sort of marketing strategy for the games, or did that come about separately?
I guess kind of, yeah. Like, so it was around about pandemic time, I think, that we'd started playing ever more online role playing. I mean, we've been doing online role playing for quite a long time because, like I said, we were in London doing role playing in the flesh an awful lot, and then we moved away to the Peak District, which was far away from most people that we knew, and we started meeting people through conventions as well. So we kind of had this increasingly dispersed social network of people who we loved,
Right.
and I think a lot of role playing is like you find people who you get on with, who have the right style of play for you, and then you find out that they live in Amsterdam or something, um, and so that again, luckily we have the internet,
Yep.
and then the pandemic kind of turbocharged that in terms of people being like, well, I'm stuck at home, it's lockdown, but I can role play. So we were doing a lot of online role playing, and me and Becky were going on one of our lunchtime walks, and I sort of said to her, why aren't we? There's people out there doing actual plays. I know they're starting to get popular. Why aren't we doing one? We already have all the material we would need. I would just need to edit it.
Hmm.
And I guess also inspired by the fact that a few years prior, we'd done an actual play podcast with the UK Indie League, which is a group of designers that we'd been going to conventions with. And Mina McJander, who organised the league, had set up an actual play podcast, a short-lived actual play podcast, which she did the editing for. So I was kind of like, oh, I've seen how this works. This is not too difficult. We could do it. There's a kind of marketing aspect to it, but it's a kind of a little bit of we think we do good role playing. Why would we not want to put it out there if we could?
Yeah. No, I definitely liked it. It felt like a very strong improv show.
Thank you.
Do you find yourself going back to games you'd made previously, or do you kind of make them and then play them for a campaign or two and then kind of leave them?
Yeah. I mean,
Maybe that's a bit too bald of a way of stating that, but
no, but it's a good question, and I think when you design a game, if you do test it thoroughly, you do tend to get a bit sick of it. To be blunt, it is you play it until the point where a normal person would say, "I want to play something else now," and so you do tend to come out of it and go, "Wow, I'd like to spend some time away from that game." I think most of the big games that we have written, we have gone back and played after a period of cleansing, um, playing other stuff. We have tended to
right.
come back to them. We've written a Lovecraft-esque is I think our most popular game, and because it's a real easy pick-up game, we've tended to use that a lot at conventions and when friends come round. And of course, Last Fleet, which you've having as the focus here, is what we're playing on the podcast, or have played on the podcast. I think that was released 2-3 years prior. So yeah, we write the kind of games that we like to play. So I guess actually in a way, it's the curse of the game designer is that you get to the point where you kind of like you play so much of your own stuff because it is so well tailored to your personal preferences and hopefully the preferences of many other people who will want to buy it, but definitely to your own.
Well, yeah. Let's talk about Last Fleet now. I guess. Do you want to talk about the setting first? I think that would be better.
Sure.
It's powered by the Apocalypse system, so it has playbooks which kind of go into the setting a little bit. So yeah, let's talk about the setting. It's a sci-fi setting. So yeah, you want to give us
Yeah,
the
yeah.
premise?
I mean, the real basic pitch is this is the more recent Battlestar Galactica TV show. If the bad guys were extra-dimensional fungus pod people instead of machines. That's as simple as I could put it. If you have not come across the Battlestar Galactica show, then the slightly longer pitch is human civilization's been destroyed by this horrifying alien entity, the Corax. It's an extra-dimensional fungus entity that extrudes living forms into our universe. It's destroyed the colonies of humankind, and now there is just one fleet of ships surviving. They're fleeing across space, and they are pursued by the Corax, by its spore ships and its fungus warriors, and by the infiltrators who it has placed on board the fleet, the copies of humans or mind-slaved humans. You can have it either way. So you're left in this kind of post-apocalyptic scenario in that you're there's no civilization left for you. You just got this fleet. You're fighting desperate space battles. You are struggling to find resources, and you are contending with the fact that you can't really trust anybody who's on the fleet with you because they might be working for the enemy.
Yeah, so the Corax, like the infiltrators, are they? Because there's lots of different ways that these are sort of body snatchers are presented in media. Like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, it's, I wouldn't say obvious, but like they sort of have a very clear, like the little scream that they do.
Right, yeah. Love that scream.
Compared to a lot more sort of space opera sci-fi where like the Cylons, Skrulls, and the Star Trek Dominion are all mostly normal people, but just kind of evil underneath.
Yeah, exactly. So in the game, it's kind of left open to you to define precisely how the infiltration works. As I say, it could be that a copy of a person is created in a pod, or it could be that a person's like some fungus in their brain and then they become a slave. But the thing refers to them as avatars. So somehow you end up with a living person who still has all of their personality and memories from when they were not working Corax, but they are willingly serving Corax and believe that Corax's objectives are good.
Okay.
And that's how I tend to play it, because it adds as the kind of horror and paranoia that you are literally talking to perhaps a loved one or a former comrade.
All right, so we have the Corax infiltrators who they know they need to be secret about it, and they think the Corax are good for what they're doing, and they're trying to sabotage the ship or something so that the Corax fleet that's chasing the human fleet can catch up. What's the ultimate goal, I guess, of the Corax? Do they just want to assimilate everyone like the Borg and turn them all into fungus people?
Yeah, I mean that is kind of left open, but certainly that's kind of how I always play it. If you listen to the podcast, there is a bit where one of the Corax infiltrator NPCs kind of unmasks themselves and gives their take on why do it, and effectively it comes down to it's just better being part of the Corax, and if everyone is part of the Corax, then there will be no conflict ever again. It'll be wonderful. We can all just be together, which I think that is kind of my effort at making a horrifying alien entity sound plausible.
Yeah, I think the Invasion of the Body Snatchers had that as the same reasoning for the pod people for why they were assimilating everyone.
Yeah,
And everyone will be peaceful.
I mean it's pretty logical, I think. I'm sure some humans have even thought that way in history. Just got to make everybody think like me, and that'll be fine.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And you had an alternate setting as well that you talked about in the podcast that was like sort of Greek mythology based, I think.
Yeah, that's right. So, Gav Thorpe of Warhammer 40,000 fame has written an alternate scenario, an alternate setting for the game, and as you say, it's I think he describes it as teleporting cities fleeing from the god of death. I think that's how it's described. It's got a slightly more, I guess I would say it's a bit more like the older Battlestar Galactica kind of a feel. It's got a mythic Greek kind of feel, and the enemy is death's minions coming after you. So it's a really cool set. I have to say, I've not played it myself. I've not used it, but I do think it's incredibly cool. And both settings, by the way, I think it's probably worth saying, in line with my philosophy of how I like to do games, that they're kind of set as rather than being a detailed, huge tome of lore that you are going to learn and put into your game, they're more like a framework that provides you with plenty of space to make your own decisions about what is the fleet like, what are the bad guys like, whether it's the Corax or the God of Death, even individual NPCs who are provided in scenarios are left as kind of broad enough sketches that you can mold them to how you want to play. And that's how I like to role play myself.
Yeah, and I think that's the intention of Apocalypse World as a system, is to have like a sandbox that you can build your own stuff on top of or change it around. And the players as well can add things.
Yeah, exactly. And it structures the business of improvising, which I think if you've played a game like Fiasco for the first time, it can be quite daunting because you're just you've got such an open theatre in which to make stuff up that it can be a bit like, well, I've got no idea what I should say. This is too open. And what is quite clever, I think, about Apocalypse World and the games that it spawned is that they give you a framework within which to improvise and just break that job down for you so that it's a little bit less scary.
Yeah. So in the setting, you described that like the humans have a fleet that's sort of sticking together and running away from the Corax that are chasing after them. But you also mentioned that there's a couple planets. So how does this work, I guess, for space where they sort of have occupied territory that they're visiting, but also constantly running? Maybe I'm misinterpreting something there.
No, so I think the idea is that there are home worlds that you could potentially visit, but you probably wouldn't want to because they are filled with Corax mycelium and generally not very nice place to go. But there's nothing to stop you taking your campaign in that direction at some point. But obviously there's the whole of the rest of space. So given that you don't have the resources of civilization at your back, and you are eventually going to run out of such things as food, fuel, all the rest of it, you need to find either remnants of civilization that you can pillage for stuff, or planets that have got usable resources on them. You can go down and get the resources. So depending on how much you this is a game that gives you quite a bit of space, whether you want to focus on having big space battles or whether you want to focus on political intrigue or the more interpersonal stuff or exploration. One of the dimensions you can go into is, I'm going to go and look and explore for planets with usable stuff on. Maybe I will try and set up a colony, hope that we can hide from the Corax. There's kind of options there for you to play with. I don't know that there are any planets described in detail in the book.
You described 3: Minhar, Ishkuria, and Nergalos, I think.
Yeah. So those are the baseline setting, such as it is the Commonwealth of Planets, I think it's called, and that is obviously it's a non-existent civilization. It's been destroyed, but the purpose of it is to create social and political color for your characters, and potentially reasons for people to have political disagreements. So it means that, when you're discussing what on earth should we do about the fact that we're running out of food, you can have an argument with your Ishkurian opposite because you've got some sort of horrible rivalry from the days back on when the Commonwealth was still intact. You don't trust them. You think that they just want to run off with all the food. It's that kind of, it's providing some political fissures into which the GM can put their fingers and pry open horrible angst and anguish.
Okay, so sort of a stand-in for like national disagreements, kind of within that unified structure.
Yeah, exactly. And to help people to think about, well, what's my character going to be like in a world where there is no country for you to come from anymore. Presumably you did come from somewhere, so that's the purpose of those.
Mm-hmm. So one thing that struck me about Last Fleet is that it seems like a game that you can win or lose, which feels unusual for RPGs, where like you could get away and then the Corax aren't chasing you anymore, or they catch the fleet and everyone dies, or becomes Corax infiltrators or whatever.
That is certainly hypothetically a possibility. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, if you kept playing it for long enough, you'd have to get to one of those.
Well, I mean, I guess were I in a game where I was tempted to do that, I mean, certainly in games I have run, there have been climactic struggles where it was possible the players might lose. I don't think I've ever run a game where it seemed possible the players might win, although it could happen. But I guess you, as a GM and as a group, you would want to lean towards, well, we know we've got about 12 sessions of play that we want to do. Let's try and push things towards a climax, so that we know that around about the 12th session, something is going to happen where we're going to be things are going to be kicking off, and maybe we'll have a chance to win or lose. So I don't know if that is. I mean, I guess if you were playing D&D or whatever, you can lose. I guess the difference is that losing in Last Fleet means potentially the end of civilization. Depending on how high you've ratcheted the stakes up, you really can lose the human race.
Yeah, I guess like you said, that many RPGs do have a lose status. Where in D&D the party dies, and I guess same here, or everyone gets arrested in Fiasco, or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, Fiasco you're playing to lose, so it's fine. But yeah, I think bad stuff can certainly happen in most games, but it's usually not as bad as the stuff that can happen in Last Fleet.
Yeah, I guess I just felt like the sort of winning possibility there felt like it's this far off thing that you're striving for, and I guess it's something that could happen within the system, but is, from my interpretation, kind of discouraged that is what the eventual end state will be, that this is sort of a tragic story. Is that feel right to you?
That's certainly how I have always run it. I think if I'd been running a really long campaign, if I'd been going for like a year or more, presumably during that time, there have been moments where it was like, oh my God, I think we're going to lose everything. I might like to hold out that possibility of, okay, you figured out how to trans-dimensionally nuke the Corax, like the root of the Corax entity, and destroy it for good, or you've figured out a way to jump to a place where they can never follow. That would be pretty nice. But usually, as I say, it's more the other way around. It's kind of like, oh heck, we're in real trouble here. We've got a fleet breathing down our neck. The commander of the fleet is about to be assassinated, and also our ship's on fire. So it tends to go down the downward spiral, desperate struggle for survival type of situation. So I would be reluctant to hold out any really positive endings unless I felt that people had really earned it.
Right. So you had a couple different organizations within the default setting, or at least I'm assuming they are, of the Red Temple religion, the Unity Party, and the Nexus sort of mafia group.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming these are kind of just sort of stand-ins for useful things. Like you want to have a religion, here's the Red Temple religion. It's not Christianity, so no one's going to get their feelings hurt for whatever happens with the Red Temple. And same thing, the Unity Party isn't the Tories, it's the Unity Party or whatever, so no one's going to get their feelings hurt. And I guess the Nexus, you got to have a criminal group there somewhere too. Is that kind of
Yeah,
what your thought was there?
yeah, more or less. I mean, it's partly about making the setting feel real. I think that's, it's an important thing to do to have stuff which feels real. So again, with the kind of the planets Ishkuria, etc. There's just something about having a texture to the setting where it doesn't really matter. Ishkuria doesn't exist anymore. Doesn't matter, but it helps to create a sense of where's my character from? What did they care about before all this started? And all of those groups kind of provide you with a bit of that. And as you say, they provide some important axes around religion and crime and so on. But they're also there in part in Last Fleet. I mean, obviously, there's one big problem that the fleet has, and that is giant alien tendrils are going to suddenly explode out of space and start shooting spore ships at you, and you're going to need to stop them. And that's kind of quite a simple problem in a way. But the more complex problem of the fleet is making sure that the human race stays together and doesn't just crack apart under the pressure of what's going on. Pressure's a big theme in Last Fleet. So providing those kind of factional differences is a key part of can be a key part of play. And within each of those factions, I've supplied like a couple of NPCs who you can connect up to your players and who have differing agendas, and they can turn out to be traitors, or they can turn out to be helpful allies, and they add to that kind of sense of a complex political reality that you're living within as part of this terrifying space war.
Yeah, it reminds me of this like idea within sports and I guess other sort of community endeavors where you want to be acting in the same direction, right? So if someone starts a play in football, then the rest of the team has to go with whatever that player has decided, because trying to do something else means that you're not working together, and the other team will work together to stop you, presumably. So then you have to, like, even if it's a bad play, you go along with it, right?
Yeah, that exactly. But I think also, so in Last Fleet, one of the mechanics actively work to kind of push you apart a bit. You have a currency called pressure, which you can spend to get bonuses to your rolls after you've rolled the dice. So it means it's real easy to win, right? You roll the dice and you go, oh, I missed it by 2. No problem, I'll just spend 2 pressure. Now I've won. But if you let that go on, then you reach breaking point and your characters will have to do something stupid. And there's a kind of list of stupid things that you can do, like, doing something incredibly risky, or having a massive shouting match with your superior officer, or whatever it might be. And there are also moves that you can use to get your pressure down, again, at some risk of doing something slightly foolish, or getting into bed with the wrong person, or telling someone a secret you maybe would be better off keeping to yourself. And all of that is aimed at kind of taking what, in a normal role-playing game, in a situation like I've described for Last Fleet, you'd be like, cool, we're all on the same team. Like you just said for football, we're all on the same team. We're all trying to win. So we're not going to be interested in shooting each other in the back. That would be a really stupid idea. So
Right.
The game is trying to push you apart and make it interesting and tempting to do stuff against each other, including one character who actually is defined as being a Corax infiltrator. So
Yes, I did want to get to that one.
everybody loves that playbook. It is objectively a very good playbook, but that's kind of the point of the game. Obviously, is to struggle against the Corax, but to discover your human differences and to explore the cracks in your politics and in your personal relationships while you're doing it.
Yeah, so the playbooks. I think part of this goes to like the sort of interpersonal relationships you mentioned earlier, where your playbooks are based on astrological signs,
Yeah.
which, yeah, is like the sort of dating tool that people use. And also, yeah, your star sign, it's a sci-fi game. Haha, it's all stars. Um,
Yeah, and it's also because in Battlestar Galactica, which obviously this game is very much a tribute to Battlestar
uh
Galactica, the original colonies there were named after you had Pycons and you had Taurons and all of that in Battlestar Galactica, and so I had to put that little tribute to that in there.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And I have to say, some people say that they find it very confusing because they're kind of like, well, I don't know anything about star signs, so yeah, fair cop.
I
But
I don't think the playbooks are necessarily that connected to what the star sign personality is from when I read them. Like, yeah, there's a connection if you want to make it, but it's more just like here's 12 and here's the name for it.
yeah, that's pretty much right. Although I have had a number of people say to me that they feel called out by their particular star sign and how it's implemented in the game.
Uh, it's all right. Well, you're seeing something there that isn't necessarily something that you put there.
Yeah, that's fine. Anything that engages people is fine.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, there's the Corax one, which I'm forgetting which one that is.
That is the Scorpio. I mean, that is the one which is most Coraxy. There's a couple with opportunities to be Coraxy, but yeah, the Scorpio specifically is an infiltrator. They have a move which means that every so often they may wake up having had a dream about planting a bomb on the ship, and then there is a bomb on the ship, and now they've got to deal with it. Yeah, that is my attempt to square a particular circle, because have you played the Battlestar Galactica board game at all?
I've heard about it, but no, I don't.
No. Well,
My
anyway,
group has
it's
wanted
just
to play it.
yeah. It's that kind of game. People want to play it. Do they actually get to play it? Maybe not.
It's so
Um,
complicated.
it's complicated. But it is one of a class of games that has like a traitor in it. So somebody will be handed a little card that says you are a traitor at the beginning, and then they've got to try and sabotage the game. And my partner hates this because she wants to be a goodie. She wants to know that she's a goodie, and she doesn't like the idea of betraying her friends, basically. And so the Scorpio playbook is my attempt to bring in that kind of feeling of there could be traitors in the game without the feeling of you're stabbing each other in the back, because everybody knows you're playing the Scorpio. Everybody knows that you're playing a traitor, but also you're role playing the good person who doesn't want to destroy the fleet and who keeps waking up having had a dream about planting a bomb on the fleet, right? So you still get to play a goodie, but you're playing a goodie who is also secretly a baddie, if that makes sense.
Yeah, kind of like in the Fight Club story where the narrator, when he falls asleep, like Tyler wakes up and then goes and
Right.
forms a
Exactly. No, it is
terrorist
exactly
cell.
like that. Yeah. So if you wanted to play, Jesus, is it Kevin Spacey who plays the main character? I'm trying to remember now.
Edward Norton in Fight Club.
Edward Norton. Okay. So if you wanted to play Edward Norton's character, knowing that Tyler Durden's out doing terrible things using your body, then it's a terrific playbook from that perspective.
And the playbooks all have like their different little moves and have sort of the stats that go with them for adding on to rolls and the usual apocalypse world kind of stuff. Is that
Yeah, that's right. They
that
they
accurate?
each come with. Actually, I'm not sure whether they do come with a suggested stat block or whether you just decide for yourself. Yeah, I'm pretty sure you just decide for yourself, and it's like the playbook advises you. You might want to take this stat high because it's quite important for this playbook. A lot of its abilities are based on this stat, so don't sell it down. But stats wise, you are kind of free to choose your own. And the moves of the playbook are what make it unique, and they're basically just special abilities like in any other game.
So yeah, it looks like there's 5 stats. So you want to talk about those?
Sure. So there are slightly oddly named stats. You've got raw, hard, cool, smooth, and
Sharp.
um, sharp. Thank you. Um, each of them has got a kind of skill dimension, if you like, but a lot of them also have a social dimension to them or an emotional dimension. So raw is really good for fighting. If you've got good raw, it means you're going to be able to do well in battle. But it also can be used for letting loose and indulging your baser needs to try and get your pressure down. So if you've got good raw, it means you're going to be able to go out and get drunk with your friends to get your pressure down with
Hmm.
less risk of accidentally ending up sleeping with your worst enemy or something like that. Um, hard is really good for resisting damage and consequences, but it's also really good for tearing a strip off someone and getting them to do what you want them to do by call someone on their shit as well. You've got sharp is really great for doing kind of research or investigation. It's also really good for interfering with other characters and trying to get in the way of their plans. Smooth is fantastic for politicking and trying to kind of pull strings around the fleet, get what you want that way, and for covering up when you are doing something you shouldn't be, which is something that players tend to do a lot in Last Fleet, especially if you're playing the Scorpio. Yeah, I guess I must have said a stat wrong earlier because I didn't say warm before.
You said
Um,
cool, which I guess opposite, but
cool,
I see
right.
where you were going with it.
I was getting mixed up. Warm and cool, they're kind of opposites, but anyway, it's fine. Um, so warm is really good for making interpersonal connections, again, to get your pressure down, but also to kind of elicit uh, sharing of personal information between characters, and is used for helping people. It's the converse of sharp. It's really good to be able to support a person either in battle or in any difficult situation. So that's the stats.
Yeah, and it seems like the game doesn't have much in the way of equipment. It's much more about relationships, like you'd said.
Yeah, that's right. So usually at some point in the game, someone will be like, "Oh, I want to pick up a gun," and you will have a quick conversation about what kind of gun do they have. I do give some information somewhere in the book about kind of roughly what the tech level might be. Weapons tend to be kind of uh, bullet firing guns rather than lasers, and you're also going to need some fighter ships because part of the game is one of the aspects of the game is, as well as choosing your playbook, that astrological sign you mentioned, you choose a role, and one of the major roles is to be a pilot who will be flying kind of
Right.
fighter type ships. So there's very, very broad categories of equipment that are kind of obviously there in the setting, but it's not got detailed equipment stats or equipment lists. It's kind of like, if you want to say, I'm going to be exploring a wrecked spaceship and I want some rope, you can have some rope. We all know that rope exists, so like the game doesn't really trouble too much with those types of detail.
Well, and like other Powered by Apocalypse systems can have like sort of magic weapons that give you a bonus or something like that, and there
Right,
isn't
yeah, that's true.
anything like that.
Dungeon World and that kind of game, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And that can come in. One of the things that's a bit unusual about Last Fleet is it encourages the GM to give you mechanical modifiers according to the situation that you're in. And that's quite standard for most role-playing games, I think, but Powered by the Apocalypse tends not to do that. And so, yeah, it's perfectly feasible that the GM could turn around and say, hey, cool, you found a rifle that's like amazingly well crafted. You can take +1 when you use it. But it's not really defined in the game. It's not a big part of play because fundamentally it's not really a game about acquiring stuff. It's more about losing stuff and then desperately trying to get it back again.
Right. So I think one of the things that really sets this game apart from other Powered by the Apocalypse systems that I've read is the relationships that you have with people, and that's sort of your kind of a stand-in for equipment from when I was reading it.
Oh yeah, I guess that's true. That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So you've got like the relationships like with the captain or the brig officer or the bartender or with each other as characters, the player characters.
Yeah. That's right. So, I mean, I think most PBTA games give you something to set up your relationships at the beginning of the game, and that can be quite general or it can be really pointy. And this is the kind of more pointy end of things. It's giving
Yes.
you questions like who has betrayed you in the past, that kind of, you know, relationships that really are going to matter a lot, either to make you trust someone and like them or really care about them, or to distrust them or feel that you want to get back at them. So every playbook comes with a set of questions like that you can ask to set up relationships with other players or with NPCs at the beginning. And there's a good mix for each one. There's another thing that I've consciously tried to do is to allow people that choice of, am I going to ask the nicer questions so that I mostly have relationships that are cozy and supportive, or am I going to ask the really pointy ones that are going to mean that 2 of the other people sat around the gaming table I secretly want to kill? And you can choose what direction you want to take that. Actually, I think it's important to give people that choice. But mechanically then, those give you, you basically get a stat for each relationship, which starts at 1, but as the game goes on, it can increase. And that stat is a bonus that can be used when they are either helping you or hindering you. So they can use their sharp to hinder you. They can use their warm stat to help you, or they can use the bonus from their relationship with you, and that can get very big. So you might be able to get a bigger bonus by using that relationship stat. So yeah, I never really thought about it as being like equipment, but I guess it kind of is. That
I mean, it's
by
it's not quite the same thing because it's not like a rifle you're carrying around, but with the
no,
sort
but
of
in terms of it's got the same reward cycle built into it. I guess in D&D you go and you find yourself better weapons so that you can improve your character. One way that you can improve your character in this game is by building better relationships, and mechanically the game will reward you for that by giving you those bonuses.
Yeah, you gotta be a goodie, like you said.
Right, but it is a double-edged sword because someone who's got a really good relationship with you can also mess with you. They can also use it to interfere with what you are doing. They will get a big bonus to that too. So in a way, it's like kind of both a +3 weapon and a cursed weapon at the same time.
Right.
And also, were they to die, that would be a very bad thing. The higher your relationship stat is, the more pressure, mechanical pressure, is suddenly dropped on your character, which is equivalent of taking a bunch of harm in another game, a bunch of damage. You'll suddenly get a load of pressure dropped on your head if they die. And so just occasionally in Last Fleet, characters do die. And when that happens, you get this kind of ripple effect of all the other players, all the other characters around the table suddenly getting hit with a ton of pressure. And then, as I mentioned earlier, that means that they're going to lose control and do stupid things because of the resulting psychological effect on the character.
Yeah, there was this effect in the Crusader Kings 3 video game at one point. They've fixed this in patches where you could have cases where that because it has stress that builds on your character, and if you have too much stress, then your character might commit suicide. And that could have the effect of like, if one of your close relationships dies, that increases stress for you, and there would just be like sort of a cascade of like stress bomb that goes off in a
Yeah.
family where it's just like, and
Oh
suddenly
no.
20 people have died because one person died, and they were like the linchpin for all of these relationships.
Oh wow. Yeah, I
Not
mean that's
not
that
quite the
is
same thing, but the sort
it's
of
not well, it's not
pressure
because they
bomb.
won't commit suicide. Probably won't commit suicide. They could do, but yes, you do get. We did have this in one of the games that I played at my local club. An important character died, and then two other characters like went off, basically kind of emotionally exploded in various ways because they had a good relationship with that character, and it caused them to lose it, which is fantastic. I mean, it's just really good fun to play.
Yeah. So the breaking point actions are alienate someone, indulge in your worst instincts, publicly melt down, take a foolish action, and there's the fifth one is like specific to each playbook, and then the
Yeah,
last
that's right.
one is exit the game. So that you take a breaking point action whenever you get to 5 pressure.
Exactly. So if you hit 5 pressure, you must take a breaking point action. You don't have to, because once you've hit 5 pressure, the rule is you can never gain or lose any pressure, and you can never do anything which would cause you to gain or lose pressure until you've taken a breaking point action. So even when you've hit that final one where you exit the game, meaning probably you die, you could just choose to say, well, I guess I can't use pressure anymore, but
Hmm.
I'm going to carry on playing anyway. I don't want my character to die. So you would really mechanically be kind of crippled, but you can do that if you want to. So it's always kind of a choice. And again, you usually have a choice about whether you're going to let yourself get up to 5 pressure or whether you're going to use the moves to kind of keep pressure down.
Mhm. Yeah, and this system reminded me of the Blades in the Dark system with stress and trauma.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, it's not quite the same for like the breaking point, because the trauma is more like now your character has a modified personality, and I guess this is that, but it's also suggesting like this is how your character has a modified personality.
Yeah, so I think in Blades, you've permanently gained a personality trait, a negative personality trait, a trauma,
Hmm. Yep.
which it then gives you XP for role playing, which is great. I mean, I love that because it means that like as my character is getting hurt, I'm actually mechanically benefiting until I die, of course.
Right.
Um, in Last Fleet, it's you don't there's no permanent change other than the fact that you're 1 point closer to having because you only choose each of these breaking point actions once.
Right.
So once you've alienated someone, you can't alienate them again. You'll have to do something dangerous instead. And once you've done that, you can't do that anymore until eventually you've only got that one option, which is to exit the game, usually by dying. Which incidentally, I have stolen more or less wholesale from Night Witches, another Jason
Ah,
Morningstar game, which is
okay.
excellent. The mechanics in Last Fleet work a bit differently, but the idea of working your way through interesting narrative beats and ultimately running out of them and having to have your character die is Night Witch's DNA in this game. But obviously, from a kind of play experience perspective, the point of it is to give you cool things for your character to do. They lose control and they say, I'm going to fly my ship into the heart of the Corax fleet, even though I've got no backup. Let's see what happens, right? I'm
Right.
going to march up to my commanding officer and tell him exactly what I think of them. And all of that makes for amazing role playing.
Yeah, and can have pretty much the same effect of like the commanding officer one. They're going to throw you in the brig, and
Yeah,
okay,
potentially.
there's your character's there now for the next year.
Yeah, we did get a few characters thrown in the brig. In the last game I played. They fortunately, or I guess not so much fortunately, is because I'm there with my hand on the scales. It happened in the middle of a revolt against the fleet leadership, so they were able to get out again, but now they're kind of a fugitive, so that was fun.
Okay. Well, yeah, I also wanted to talk about the roles that you mentioned earlier. So you have the playbooks, which is kind of a personality and a set of extra playbook moves that you can choose from. And then you
Right.
also have the roles, which are more like this is what your character does on the ship or within the fleet.
Ah, yeah, ROLES. I was, yes, that's right.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Yes, yes.
yeah. So yeah, that's right. So each character gets to pick a role. You have pilot, marine, tactician, politician, or I think they're called influencer, in fact, and investigator, and and engineer slash scientist. So some of them are kind of doing roles. You're going to get to fly a fighter ship around. You're going to get to fight off attacks from boarding actions, or you're going to be a tactician in charge of directing all the other bits of the fleet. And some of them are more kind of political. So the influencer and the investigator tend to be the type of characters who are out hunting for infiltrators or trying to stop the fleet from falling apart politically and socially. In a way, no two games are the same because you're going to get a set of different playbooks that people will choose and a set of different roles. And yeah, it's very rare to get the exact same combination twice.
And are the roles intended to be like a job that your character has, or more like a skill set? Like, could you be a pilot character that does not have like a fighter ship that you have, and it's more like just you flew jets on Earth before the
Yeah, so
Corax
in fact,
came?
that has happened in the podcast. In fact, we have a character who is a journalist. She's a former pilot, and so if you the one slight oddity about it is so each role gives you a special ability that you can do that no one else can do. And in the case of the pilot, the main thing it gives you is that you can fly a ship in combat. If anybody else tries to do that, it's a bad idea. They can do it, but it's a bad idea, and it's probably going to go badly wrong. So this person did not have the pilot playbook, even though they had trained as a pilot, and we just kind of rationalized it as they started out as a pilot and they washed out. But the result was that they had this backstory where they'd they and one of the pilots had trained together and had a prior relationship. So if you don't take the pilot, they are a skill set definitely, but if you don't take the pilot role, you will not be able to fly combat. On the other hand, you could take the pilot role and not be a pilot. You could be an ex-pilot, and similarly, you could take the investigator role and not be someone whose job it is to investigate anything. It just so happens that you've got that skill set.
Gotcha.
And that does happen a fair bit. You get people who have leadership skills but aren't in a leadership position, or worse, are in a leadership position but have no leadership skills, for example.
Right. Well, I wanted to talk about the podcast campaign as well. One of the things that I noted is that it seemed like you guys were like from the very start setting up a lot of sexual tension between the different characters.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which, I mean, I guess from my usual D&D self of like we're slaying monsters, it's not something that usually comes up.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of a feature of my gaming group really, is that they love to do romance and sex as part of their play. And Last Fleet is a game that kind of caters for that. It gives you space to do that if you want to.
Uh-huh.
Because of all those interpersonal mechanics. I think at one point in the campaign, so that there are two characters in the campaign who have a very clear kind of what is the term? Will they, won't they? Type of relationship. They're clear romantic and sexual tension, but
Right.
they haven't actually done anything about it yet. And a lot of the campaign is therefore about what's going to happen there. But one of them, I think, hits breaking point at some point, or rolls badly on a roll. I can't remember, and so she goes off and sleeps with one of the other characters. So it's like, and I know the player did that on purpose to create grist for that relationship.
Right.
The will they won't they relationship is now kind of painful that that has happened. And so the game's mechanics, again, all those kind of breaking point mechanics, give you the opportunity to do that kind of thing if you want to. You don't have to play it that way, but and the game doesn't assume you're going to play it that way at all. But it's great for people who like in-character romance and all of that.
Do you have any like sort of safety tools for that you've like included into the game as something that you want people or encourage people to use?
Yes, I am a big advocate for safety tools. I don't like to call them safety tools myself. I know everyone else does, but to me, it's safety makes it sound like it's kind of dangerous to play, which I think it could be dangerous to
Yeah,
play, but
comfort
mostly
tools might
it's
be a better word for it. Yeah.
yeah. I think of them as ways that you support your fellow players. You know, you don't want the people around the table to have a bad time, so you use the tools to help each other to have a good time. And so I call it making the game fun for everyone. That's what I always say in my games is we're trying to make the game fun for everyone. And every game that I write contains a section with that title where I will just talk about what aspects of this game might trip you up and what safety tools might be useful to help avoid that. So obviously, in this game, the possibility of sexual relationships is there, and some people will like that and some people won't. There's the kind of the fact that it's a wartime setting, and you know war can be violent. um, there's the possibility of authoritarianism or interrogation scenes that can get quite heavy. So that's to me, it's not really my job to give you specially designed safety tools. I think there's loads of really great tools out there, so there's no point in me reinventing the wheel. But what I do
Right.
like to do is just call out which are the bits of this game where you might find that it's helpful to have thought about them before you start playing.
Yeah. And I guess I should mention here for the people listening, but Josh's podcast is like I would say tamer than like a sitcom and like sexual and violent stuff. And I'm just discussing it because it felt like it was somewhat of a focus more than I'm used to for RPGs.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, so we definitely draw a veil over all of that stuff, if only because we want people to listen to our podcasts who otherwise might not. But yeah, even in our home game, we wouldn't want to describe anything. I don't know, how could I say pornographic? You know,
Right. Yeah.
we want those relationships to be there and the fallout from them because that's the juicy stuff. Is like you slept with the wrong person and now you really regret it. That, like you say, that kind of sitcom or soap opera type of drama device that's gonna really drive your characters into interesting interactions.
Well, yeah. Did you want to talk about the actual campaign that you played on the podcast, or I mean, I guess there's a limit to how much you might want to go on that because of not wanting to give the whole story away.
Yeah, I mean, I've made allusions to it throughout, but I don't know. Like you say, I don't want people to. Um, maybe this is a moment to say, listen, if you want to go and listen to the campaign, stop listening now, and I can talk a bit about it. Have you all left now? Good. Okay. So yeah, the campaign really for me, that campaign is very much about the four characters and their personal relationships. There is a big plot arc around. This is a big spoiler. Discovering that one of the senior officers in the fleet is actually a Corax agent, and that takes quite a while to build up to. But you know, that's the kind of what in TV terms is the A plot, I guess.
Hmm.
So their characters are trying to fend off physical attacks by the Corax while also trying to make sure that the fleet doesn't end up under the control of the enemy. But for an awful lot of that campaign, I was sitting back and letting the players have their in-character interactions with each other, which I think is a lot of the fun of a game like Last Fleet. I've already mentioned the characters who had the on again, off again relationship. One of the characters was a Scorpio, so everyone was kind of obviously at the beginning of the game with the Scorpio, you like to try and put them in a position of trust, and that's what we did. So we gave them this kind of very important, high-ranking advisor type of role, and all of the characters leaned into kind of trusting them and giving them stuff to do and knowing that actually they were working for the enemy. And a lot of the campaign's arc actually is driven by that and the kind of when are people going to work out that this person is on the side of the enemy, and what are they going to do about it? So it's quite difficult to summarize what's happening in the whole campaign. Do you have any questions about it?
Um, I guess one of my questions for you as a DM would be, what did you do to make it feel like fun and exciting, but not derivative, I guess, from, like you said, Battlestar Galactica?
Yeah. Well, I guess the answer to that is, like, as a GM, I am heavily improvising, and I tend to listen to what the players are saying, and quite often I'll ask them a question about, okay, so who is your commanding officer? I'll let them define it for me, and then I'll run with what they're giving me. So I'm running with what the players are giving me, and I'm running with what the dice are telling me. If they roll badly, then I'm going to have bad stuff happen to them. But all of that serves to ensure that it can't be too derivative, and it is always somewhat exciting, because anytime you pick up the dice, something might go wrong. That's a thing about PBTA, is there is no such thing as just you fail. It's always you fail, and so this happens. So we've had situations where the players roll badly in the middle of a battle, and as a result, I declare that there's been a boarding action. So now, not only are they fighting these other spaceships, but there are Corax warriors pouring onto their ship. So I think that keeps it exciting, is that feeling of anything could happen. And we get a lot of big twists and turns that are basically just driven by somebody rolled badly 3 times on the trot. But whether it's derivative, I mean, I think what to me what makes the game most interesting is much less about am I giving you totally surprising genre trappings, because at the end of the day it is extremely like like Battlestar Galactica. There are battleships, there are soldiers, and there are baddies coming to get them.
Right. Yeah.
And there are infiltrators, but the individual relationships are completely different, and that's what makes the game interesting, is how people's relationships lean into each other. So there's a couple of like amazing moments from the campaign which were very much player driven. We had in this particular game, there's 2 big battleships, and one of them is commanded by a player. And at one point, because they'd hit breaking point, they basically jumped their ship away by themselves to go and try and do a critical mission by themselves, and got themselves into the most tremendous trouble, because once they jumped in there, the Corax fleet arrived and they had to try and fight them by themselves. And I don't know, like, probably something like that happened in Battlestar Galactica, but the uniqueness of the sort of configuration of player decisions in that situation, it made it feel unique. Because it was them that made it happen. It wasn't me. I'm not sitting there kind of dealing out plot and letting them deal with it. They are driving the story. And there was another situation where a character managed to they encountered a Corax inside the ship's drive room, and the Corax it was like a kind of cocoon of somebody clearly like growing inside this cocoon, and is that they're going to become an infiltrator in the fleet, and their
Uh-huh.
little tendrils came out to try and grab the player's body and infiltrate their body and make them into a Corax too.
Ugh.
And so in that moment, the player decided that they were going to smash their own arm into the spinning mechanism of the ship's drive and destroy their own arm. No, yeah, I could not have come up with that, but it was very beautiful and felt very unique. So
Yeah, yeah, that's having your players amputate their well, the characters amputate their own arms is definitely not something that you could force on them as a DM.
yeah, and I think that's to me the wonderful thing about role playing is that the other people around the table are going to surprise you and do cool things, and letting them do that and letting them drive the story often is a recipe for much more fun than you could have come up with if you planned it all out in advance, you know?
Hmm. Yeah.
So that's, I guess, I mean, I don't know what other APs, I don't know how they work and how much people are improvising and how much people are planning, but definitely for Black Armada Tales, um, everything you hear is made up on the spot. Nothing is planned out in advance, and we're all just reacting to what each other are saying, and what the dice are telling us. So, if you want to know how any of the games we play are played for reals, we are doing it for reals.
Well, what's next for game design for you?
Yeah, so well, I mentioned we talked earlier about Brindlewood Bay and The Between and Apocalypse Keys, and I'm currently writing a game in that kind of oeuvre. It's called Ex Tenebris, and it's a far future science fiction game, a kind of gothic science fiction game, kind of in a similar mold to Warhammer 40K, I guess, but
All right.
without the Nazis. So I'm trying to write an investigation game where you're kind of the equivalent of the Inquisition. You are agents who are going out and trying to prevent demons and cults and uh, alien infiltrators and what have you from gaining a foothold in the Republic of Stars, which is the setting for the game. That's kind of the setting and the situation you're in. The rules then are going to be something in a kind of Brindlewood Bay type of approach to improvised mystery. And as I say, a very important aspect of the setting to me is I wanted the players to feel like they were working for a government and a civilization that was worth defending. Hence, no Nazis. I'm trying to
Okay.
trying to create a kind of grimdark future that is sufficiently not grim and dark that you actually do feel like you're the goodies.
Yeah, that was a issue I had for running Star Wars, as my players always wanted to be dark side characters because they're the ones getting all the cool toys.
They're so cool, right? Exactly. So that's yeah. Um, Hopefully the goodies get the cool toys in this game. There will
Yes.
be. It's a science fiction game, but it has got sorcerers. You can play a sorcerer. It has got ancient sentient technological relics. You can play one of those if you want to. It's got super spies with ridiculous, over the top um, abilities. You can play one of those. So I'm a big believer in give the players cool characters to play. Make sure every single power in the game, every single special ability is one that you go, wow, I really want that, because I don't want anybody to look at it and go, meh. So yeah, the goodies get the cool toys.
Nice.
And yeah, so you mentioned Blades in the Dark. This is going to be mechanically, it's a bit of a mashup between Brindlewood Bay and Blades in the Dark. It's using some of the Blades tech.
Uh-huh.
It's bringing together everything that I think is good about Powered by the Apocalypse, about Brindlewood Bay, and about um, Forged in the Dark, and my own design insights to create something that I think will be unique and fun.
And is this going to be going out through Kickstarter at some point, or?
Yeah, absolutely. this is how it's done now, right? You can't make a game without crowdfunding. So we will definitely. I don't know. Our last couple of campaigns we've done through BackerKit rather than Kickstarter, which we find BackerKit to be quite good. But we may go back to Kickstarter for this one. Not sure yet. But yeah, that'll be sometime next year. And can I also just mention another project that is about to become a physical reality? Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
So our first big game was Lovecraft-esque, and Lovecraft-esque is like an improvised emergent mystery game for Lovecraftian fiction.
Right.
The idea was to enable people to create their own story that would feel like Lovecraft could have written it, but without any of Lovecraft's icky racism and kind of avoiding duplicating any. Everyone's played in games of Call of Cthulhu where you're like, from the first session that it's deep ones because everybody knows what a deep one is.
Right. Yeah.
This is a game where you don't. You get that genuine sense of the unknown because the monsters are created at the table.
Ah.
And we have recently crowdfunded the second edition of that game. It's a boxed set with cards. The game is driven by cards. All of the cards have kind of prompts for different types of clue or weird thing that you could have happen in your story. And you get dealt a hand of cards and use the cards to generate your bit of the mystery. There's no GM, so that the mystery emerges from the contribution of everyone at the table. And yeah, so that is very soon coming out in the next month or two, I hope. We're just finishing off the manufacturing process now, so it should be shipping pretty soon.
Oh, cool. And you did that one through BackerKit?
No, that was Kickstarter. We did that back in 2015. And in fact, I should say, I think Lovecraft-esque is named as an influence on Brindlewood Bay. The idea of
cool.
having that kind of emergent mystery. Brindlewood Bay basically takes that idea and moves it into the GM'd space and adds a lot of other ideas, to be fair to them. So yeah, it's like a GM-less version of Brindlewood Bay, if you like.
Well, I think we covered everything that I wanted to get to in the episode. Was there anything else that you wanted to talk about?
Nice. No, not really. That was a really great conversation. Thank you.
Well, I always close out by asking if you have any advice for other DMs. So you got any nuggets you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, I think I said it's something like this earlier in the discussion, but it's essentially like build on what the players give you. That would be my advice for GMs always. The players are telling you what they find interesting. When they say things at the table, they're telling you what they find interesting and what they want to see in the game. So if a player does something unexpected, your first reaction to it should always be, cool, what can I do with that? How can I build on that? And I think that always gets a great reaction from players, and it usually leads to a story that surprises you every bit as much as it surprises everyone else around the table. That's my top advice. Oh, I have one other piece of advice, actually, if I can.
Yeah.
Yeah, my number one piece of advice that I always say to anybody who will listen is you, the GM, are not responsible for making the game fun. That's my top piece of advice, and I think so many GMs don't realize that. They think they are. They think it's their job to make the story interesting, to make the game fun, to make sure that everybody has a good time, and I think that's wrong. I think actually, when things go wrong, usually it's not just the GM, and everyone needs to be brought into a conversation about that. And when things are going right, it's usually because everyone is working together to make it good. And I just think that's important for a lot of people who are going around carrying this heavy burden of thinking, I'm the one who's got to make it work, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely a sentiment that's been shared before on the show about needing to look out for your own interests as a DM, and not just sort of being a servant storyteller for other people.
Yeah, absolutely. And bring other people in, because they're always, in my experience, if you say to the players, I've got a problem here, I need help to move the story along, they'll usually step up and help you do it.
All right. Well, thanks, Josh. I think this was really good. It was great talking to you.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you very much. Thanks for the invite.
Thanks for listening, everybody. That was Josh and his game Last Fleet. You can find out more about Last Fleet at blackarmada.com. That's blackarmada.com. And Josh also has his podcast, Black Armada Tales, that features the different games he designs for the Black Armada website to sell there. So if you'd like to hear Josh and his players play other interesting games like Last Fleet, you can check out the podcast on any podcast app. Thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed it.